What if that's true? What if God always knew there was a better me, better you than there actually was? And always treated us as if there was a better us. You know, we've been in this series, now this is our third week, this series called Extraordinary, not extraordinary, but extraordinary. It's what people like us do. And it's a reminder again that maybe we need to rethink how we think about so much in life, about this push, about all the stuff that we've been told. Because some of us grew up in an era where we were told that, you know, you're extraordinary, you're special, you're really, really special, and you can do anything you want. And hopefully by now you figured out that that isn't necessarily true. Because you work in a place that they don't treat you that special, and you haven't been able to do everything you want it because it's too expensive, you don't have the time, and you don't have the energy. Today we're going to talk about something I think that resonates with all of us, and maybe to look at it just in a little bit different way. But here's something I think is true for all of us. We all want to be successful. And that success might look at different things at different stages, wherever you might be. You know, if you're in school, success might be just getting a C- in that class, just so you can pass, right? So you don't have to take it over again because nobody wants to take that class over again. And maybe for you, success is not a C-. You are A+, as you are, you know, the top of the list. You're a 4 something GPA. That's where success is for you. Maybe success for you is to get those degrees so that you can get out and do that job that you have your mind and heart set on. You know, maybe it's meeting somebody, maybe it's having kids, maybe it's traveling. I don't know what success looks like, but I think we all want to be successful. But here's the question we're going to think about pretty strongly today. Does success feel like we think it does? Does success, the way you think about success, the way I think about it, does it feel like what we think it does? Or maybe is there something we're missing? Part of this series has been based on some writings of a guy who's not a Christian. He's a guy by the name of Mark Manson. I think he's got some great insights, and that's why I've been sharing them with you. And if you've looked him up, yes, it is that Mark Manson, but I haven't put up his title up here because you know why I didn't put the title up there, right? But I think sometimes we miss some stuff. And what I love about this is Mark is not a religious person. He's not a Christian. He's not a follower of Jesus. He's not a follower of anybody. So if you're not a follower of anything or kind of not really religious and you're kind of not really sure about this whole thing, I want you to know other people have some ideas that we share with them. And maybe we can share those same ideas with you. Here's what he talks about in success. He says, if you don't choose your priorities in life, the world is going to choose them for you. Which again, if you've been in a place like this much, you're thinking, that sounds like a really churchy statement, right? The world's out there, it's against us. Mark, a guy who's not in here in this kind of space, says, no, this is just a thing, right? This is just a people thing, and this is just a world thing. This is just a culture thing. That if we don't choose our priorities, the world is going to choose them for us. And some of us know that really clearly because we've ended up in places that we would have never thought we were going to get, but here we are. What happens, he goes on and writes, what happens is if there's a vacuum in the things you care about, the world will quickly show up and insert its own priorities in its place. If we got some space, it's always trying to get us to agree with things, to sell us things. And so he goes on and says, if you don't decide what matters to you, the world is going to be constantly pressuring you and incentivizing you to care about the things that it cares about. This point is we need to figure out our values, get our values straight, because our values drive so much in life. And if we don't have any values, we're going to get some put into us. And the worst part, he goes on and writes, the worst part is that when you adopt the values of the world around you, you don't actually realize that it's not you. You just think it's normal. And the things that you're paying attention to or that you're following or that you're invested in actually aren't the things you care about. And so one day you wake up and you're 40 and you realize that you've lived your entire life for somebody else. And that you've spent every ounce of your being trying to impress others and win approval for others. And if you're in 40 and that's kind of where you're at, you know how empty that leaves you feeling, right? This idea that I've missed so much because I haven't ever really figured out who I am and what I'm about, what I value. And if you're in your 20s, this is part of the reasons I'm sharing this, because I think you're in a great stage. Your teens and 20s, this is a great time to begin to think about these things so that you don't get to that old age of 40 and look back on your long life and think, man, I have so many regrets, right? Does success feel like we think it does? That's what we're going to talk about today. But before we get there, I want to invite you to bow your heads and let's pray one more time together, right? Father, my prayer is simple today. I ask not only for myself, but everybody that's in this space and who's watching this at whatever time they are. I pray for a gift today from you. I pray that you would help us not only open our minds and our hearts to what you may be wanting to say to us, but somehow you give us the ability to think and put things together that maybe have always been there, but we haven't been able to put together. And maybe today would be the day we go, now that all makes sense. And maybe in the process of it making sense, we'll make some different choices. We'll head in a different direction. And we'll be reminded again that you really have been with us through it all and that you really are good to us. And if you can get us there today or get us headed in that direction today, this will have been time well spent. In your name, amen. Does success look like, feel like we think it does? And obviously you hear me keep asking that question. You're thinking, well, Mike, why don't you tell us the answer, right? I want you to come to your own conclusion to this, but you know that I think that's an important question because I keep asking it, right? Back to Mark Manson in one of his articles called Personal Values, How to Know Who You Really Are. Achieving success in life is not nearly as important as our definition of success. That's really important. Because a lot of us have been bought into the idea that achieving success is what's important, right? I just need to figure out, I need to be successful. And his point is, no. That's not nearly as important as having a definition of success. If our definition of success is horrific, like say world domination and slaughtering millions, because some people's success is that picture, then working harder, setting and achieving goals, and disciplining our minds all become a bad thing. His point's pretty simple, right? If your values are bad, it's gonna, no matter how committed you are, that's not gonna be a great place to be. A lot of people obsessively focus on being happy and feeling good all the time. That's your picture of success. Not realizing that if their values suck, feeling good will hurt them more than help them. Which leads me to wonder this question: are the things we value showing up in our lives? And that can be a positive question or that can be a negative question, right? Are the things we value? Because let's be honest, we all say we have values of things. A lot of us say we have values, but the reality is, do we live our lives if those values matter? And sometimes they are, right? And sometimes our bad values have showed up in our lives, and sometimes our good values have shown up in our lives. But are the things we value showing up in our lives? And maybe a little more scary question is, what if they are? Because what if, again, the things we value aren't really the things we value, as he had written just a couple minutes ago we looked at. What if the things we value are just the values that others have put on us? And those are the things that are showing up in our lives. Because our picture of what success looks like and the values that drive that picture end up showing up in our lives in some pretty dramatic ways. In fact, there's an occasion from the life of Jesus when he faces this reality, and what starts with a question from the crowd turns into a made-up story that Jesus will tell with a point that, and I'll be honest with you, before we even look at this passage, some of us are going to be really uncomfortable with Jesus' point. Because Jesus' point is like, that just doesn't feel right. That doesn't seem right. But again, it's Jesus and it's his point, so I'm just going to share that with you, and then we'll figure out where to go from there, right? So here we're going to pick it up over in Luke chapter 12. And the setting is they're at this, Jesus is teaching, right? He's got this crowd by now. There's just crowds wherever Jesus goes. And people will, shout out questions for him from the crowd. And in this crowd, there's someone in the crowd who says to Jesus these words: Teacher over here, hey, thank you. Tell my brother to divide with me the property our father left. Tell my brother to divide my family inheritance. For whatever reason, this guy feels like this is the opportune time to call his brother out, sort of to throw him out in front of the public and say, hey, Jesus, my brother isn't being fair with me. And I know you're the teacher. You're this rabbi. You're this important person. You can make this right by simply telling him to do what's right. To which Jesus gives a really unusual question, something that if you're not familiar with Jesus, you may be surprised that he said. Because here's what he says: Who said I should judge or decide? Who appointed me judge or arbitrator between you? which almost is like Jesus saying, hey, I didn't come to fix everything, right? Not my job to fix all the little minor details. That's not what I'm about. Which is a little uncomfortable for us because we're like, no, I want Jesus to care about those things in my life. I want him to fix those things, right? To go straighten those things out. And a lot of us have prayed those prayers in those moments, right? God, just make this all work out, right? Help me in this situation. Bail me out of this situation or change their hearts, change their minds, help something happen. But in this moment, Jesus says, what makes you think that's my job? And then Jesus says something that makes the guy really regret the fact that he raised his hand that day and shouted out to Jesus. Because then Jesus says to the crowd, folks, be careful. Be careful and guard against all kinds of greed. To which the guy has to be like, what? I mean, be called out, as a greedy person in front of your whole crowd, in front of your community. What if Jesus says these words, not just to point out this man's greed, but the thing that resides in all of us? This idea of, wanting more than we have. And this idea that, everything that comes to us is for us. And the idea that most of us, we like nice things and, it costs to get nice things. And so there's something appealing in it all. Because the reality is, greed is one of those things that is really hard to see in the mirror. Because none of us considers ourselves greedy. Even if the people around us do, right? Because it's like, no, I'm not being greedy. I'm just getting what's mine, right? Because if I don't stand up for me and get what's mine when I get the chance, I may miss out on this opportunity. So I'm going to be there. Greed is just one of those things that we don't like to think about. For whatever reason, Jesus says this guy's idea to fix this really hard, legal battle between him and his brother. This thing that sort of seems reasonable. Hey, let's call an authority, someone higher authority, maybe somebody my brother respects who would say to him, yeah, just take care of this, do right by him. That's what he's looking for. He's doing for Jesus to say, do a right by him message. And instead he gets folks, be careful. And watch out, guard against all kinds of greed, because greed comes in all different kinds of forms. Then he says these words, life is not measured by, does not consist of how much one owns. To which some of us are sitting here hearing that thinking, maybe you never heard that before and you're thinking, what is he talking about? Of course life consists in what you own, right? I mean, that's what makes up life, having stuff and being able to enjoy that stuff, having, not only just a house, but a second house, down at the beach that I can enjoy. Having nice cars, having nice things, having extra stuff. All that extra stuff makes my life valuable, makes it have meaning. And Jesus is like, no, it doesn't. It's not really measured by all the stuff we have. And then Jesus, we're told, tells a story, tells a parable. And a parable, again, is a made-up story, typically to teach one point, but again, it's a made-up story. It's not a real story. It's a story that Jesus tells to convey something. And here's how the story goes. There was a rich man. And the rich man has some land, and he has a good crop this year, right? And so as soon as Jesus starts telling this parable, everybody back then would have thought, okay, there's a rich guy, which means in their mindset, somebody blessed by God. Because when people were rich, they were viewed as being favored by God. So here's somebody who's favored by God. And he's rich, right? So he already has a bunch of stuff, and he has a bunch of land, and his land just produces even more this year. And so this guy, Jesus says, he thinks to himself, what will I do? I love it that in Jesus made up stories, people talk to themselves because, oh, by the way, we all talk to ourselves, right? Hopefully not out loud when somebody else is around, but we all have a little bit, right? We kind of have those conversations. And so Jesus says this guy has that conversation that's just a human thing. He says, what will I do? What am I going to do? Because I have no place to keep all this crops. I've had this, bounty load of this really good crop this year, and I don't have any more place to put it all. So then Jesus says, here's what he says. He says, I know what I'm going to do. I'm going to tear down my barns and build bigger ones. And there I'm going to store all of my grain and all my other goods. I mean, he comes to the conclusion that a lot of us would, right? That if we have something and we get an extra abundance of it, what do? Let's make room for the extra abundance. Why? So that it's there. So it's protected and safe. And so this is what the guy says, this is what I'm going to do. I'm going to just build. I'm going to tear down my old stuff because it wasn't big enough. I'm going to build bigger and better. And then I'm going to fill it all up, and I'm going to be set. In fact, he says, then I'm going to say to myself, I have enough good things stored to last for many years. And I'll tell myself, rest. Take it easy, chill out, relax, right? Eat, drink, and just enjoy life. This is the time to just, sit back and ride this thing out, right? I've been successful, and now I've really been successful right here at the end. I'm just gonna sit back now and enjoy my success. Again, in this made-up story, Jesus has God enter the scene. And he says, the guy sits back and says, I'm just gonna kick back, relax. But God shows up and says to this guy, foolish man. And I don't want us to miss this. He doesn't say foolish not because he was rich, but because he assumed it was for him. God says to this guy, foolish man. You've missed the whole point. Tonight, your life, your soul will be demanded back from you, which is one of those gulp moments, right? Because the whole crowd's like, uh-oh, this is not good. The fact that God shows up and says, foolish man, but now he says, tonight's the night. Your life's gonna be demanded from you. This is the end of your life. But God then asks this man a really important question. He says, so, who will get those things you have prepared for yourself? And the answer is, right? This guy spent his whole life. He's been successful. He's been hoping and planning for this day. He gets the day finally there. He can sit back. He can retire. Maybe he's retiring early, but he's going to sit back. He has enough to enjoy the rest of his life in luxury, which is like all of us, the majority of us, our picture of what success would be, right? To get to that stage in life where we don't have to worry about anything, that we're taken care of, that we don't have to, stress over that stuff, that we can just enjoy life. Because isn't that what we should be doing, enjoying life? And in this made-up story, Jesus says, God shows up and says, not so fast. Now all the stuff that you've set up, who gets it? Someone else. To which again, if we're just straight reading this, it doesn't seem fair, right? It doesn't seem fair that this guy has worked as hard as he had. He's become rich. He's been successful. And he finally gets to that peak of success that we all would love to get to. That place to not have to worry about anything. And it's over for him. And maybe, maybe you've known, people your parents' age or, other people maybe you've known in life, aunts, uncles that, they got to retirement and they retired and like within a year or two they died. It doesn't seem fair, does it? After working all this time in life and finally getting to a place where they can sit back and sort of enjoy life, enjoy their family, enjoy to do whatever they want to do if they can afford it. Doesn't seem fair. But what if this story isn't about fairness? What if it's about something that's bigger and deeper than we imagine? Maybe how we treat what we have is a bigger deal than we think. How we value it, how we, not just treasure it, but how we treat it, what we do with it. Back to Mark Manson. He says, if we only love ourselves, then we become self-absorbed and indifferent to the suffering or issues of others. The idea of loving ourselves is important, but if we get sort of just a little bit too much me loving, right? Then I block out all the other people around me. If you make yourself the highest value in your life, then you will never feel the desire to sacrifice for anything. And life will feel purposeless and just chasing one high after another. If everything you do is for the sake of money and then tragedy strikes and all of that money is eaten up by hospital bills, right? This whole idea that, you've just about money, but now, some tragedies happen, hospital's there, and a loved one goes to the hospital, all the hospital bills, you will lose much more than a loved one. You will lose the perceived purpose for living as well. When we make success all about success, and we lose that success, then our whole reason for existing is gone. But Jesus has just finished the story, right? He tells the story, right? Again, it's an unfair story. It kind of makes us a little uncomfortable because why? Why would this guy finally hit that peak and then lose everything in a moment? Why would he die at this moment? Why would God say, hey, who's going to get it all? But Jesus adds adds a piece to the end of the story. He's stopped the story now. Now he simply speaks to the crowd and he says these words, this is how it will be for those who store up things, who store up treasure for themselves and are not rich toward God, not rich in what matters to God. Which again seems kind of harsh. And again, if you're not a religious person, you may be thinking, well, that's one of the reasons I don't want to follow that God, right? Because this God that's going to be so harsh and it's going to treat all of us this way. He's going to, just when I finally get to retirement, he's just going to call my life the end of my life. That's not Jesus' point, all right? Jesus' point is this guy saw that everything that came to him was his. What comes to me is for me. What comes to us is for us, and I can use it however I want because it's all about me. And what if what comes to us isn't just for us? Notice Jesus also said that, this is how it's going to be for everybody who just stores up stuff for themselves. That they're going to end up with nothing because when they die, they don't get to take it with them. But he says, what you need to do is be rich towards God. Do about the things that matter to God. And what does it mean to be rich towards God? Does it mean I pray more, pray longer? Does it mean I read more of the Bible and know more of the Bible and memorize more of the Bible? What does it mean to be rich towards God? Let me give you an idea of what I think it means to be rich towards God. To be rich towards God is to treat the people that God cares about well. Because isn't it true that if somebody treats the people we love well, it's like they're treating us well? You want to be nice to me, be nice to my wife, be nice to my kids, right? If you're nice to my wife, nice to my kids, I really don't care how you treat me, because I'm going to be good because they're taken care of, because they're what matters to me. And what if that's true of God as well? What if this whole idea of being rich towards God is really about taking what's come to us and recognizing it's not all for us, that some of it's for us, but not all of it's for us? What if we use some of that extra, that stuff that isn't for us, for others that God loves and cares about? Which, by the way, according to my understanding of the people that wrote the Bible, is like everybody. The person next, in fact, turn to the person next to you and says, that's you. Say it's you. Then look at the other side, say that's you, right? I want to make sure everybody feels like, everybody knows that's who's part of God, who God cares about. And it's not just the people just right here, it's the people out there, it's the people in your neighborhood, it's the people you work with, even that person. I think Jesus tells the story to push back on what he knows will be a lasting picture of what success is like. That success is, being rich and getting to a place where we have enough that we don't have to worry about anything. And we think only about ourselves in the process. Back to Mark Manson. In an article he wrote, How to Be Successful in Life, he talks about the overlooked downside of extreme success. What happens when you really are extraordinary, right? You're extraordinary in your field, you have some success, and it begins to come to you. Are there any downsides to being successful? And so here's what he writes. Before setting your sights on becoming more successful than 99% of the people, take a moment to consider the following potential drawbacks. And he lists 3. First one, you will be unpopular. Because there's something that in humans, right? We're glad for somebody else until they get too much, because then they're like, they're going to lord it over us. They're going to kind of flaunt it in our face. They're going to, post it all over the place, and we're going to be like, right? Because for so many of us, it's a competition. You're going to be unpopular. In fact, he writes, achieving success can alienate you from friends and family. And some of you know what that's like, right? You've become successful in your field, and you went to school with other people who were going in the same field, and they haven't been that successful. And there's just that tension there, right? So Mark says, just be aware of that. One of the things, if you really want to be successful, you're going to be unpopular. And oh, by the way, number 2, I love number 2. You will fail a lot. which is not typically, young people, listen to me, it's not typically the picture we have of what success is, right? Success is like we never miss a shot. We always, everything works perfectly. We get straight A's. There's always this perfect. That's what success is, and that's not what any successful person will tell you. Every successful person will tell you they failed a lot. In fact, multiple times. And the third one is what he calls the happiness myth. And this is what he means by the happiness myth. Success doesn't automatically equate to happiness. But that's the myth we believe, right? That I'm successful, I'm gonna be happy, because who wouldn't be happy with all that success? The power, the prestige, the position. Who wouldn't be happy with, having all the stuff, all the games, all the toys, all the whistles? Success doesn't automatically equate to happiness. In fact, he went on and wrote, in reality, success often amplifies who you already are and how you feel. And this pushes back at what some of us think is that, if I was more successful, I would be more generous, right? Because I'd have more to give. It would just automatically happen. And his point is, no. All what happens is it amplifies who you already were. If you weren't a generous person before, you're probably not going to become that generous person afterwards. Because you can be generous and be dirt poor. You can be generous and have a moderate amount. You can be generous you can be generous and have a lot. It's not a cure-all for all of life's problems. Again, not a religious person saying something that sounds kind of religious, right? Kind of like Jesus, that life isn't made up of having all the stuff. In fact, it's the old joke, right? Money isn't doesn't promise happiness, but we'd sure give it a good shot. See, what if God made us to be more than self-absorbed consumers? In fact, if you were to go back and read what Luke records is happening on that day, Jesus didn't stop with just this whole idea of, the made-up story and the big push there about, this is what's going to be for everybody. Jesus went on. In fact, he gets his disciples. He talks now to those that have committed to following him, and he says these words to them. Guys, listen, life is more than food, and the body is more than clothes. I know you need food, and I know you need clothes, but it's more than just that. Don't have so little faith. Don't always think about what you will eat and what you will drink, and don't keep worrying. Because Jesus knows that what worrying does is it takes the focus off anything, takes the focus off God, takes it off of anything, and puts it right on the problem and right here. In fact, Jesus says, don't keep worrying, because listen, all the people, all the Gentiles, those people that don't believe about God, all the people in the world are trying to get those things. It's the story of everybody's life, right? We're trying to get, we're trying to earn enough till we have a place to, roof over our head, food in our table, clothes on our body. Some of us like really nice clothes on our body, right? A really nice car in our parking lot, right? It's like, but we're everybody's after those pieces. But Jesus says, for those of you that are following me, you need to know something. Your Father knows, He knows you need them. And so he finishes it with that quote that if you've been around a place like this, you've heard it before, right? But seek God's kingdom with all your other needs will be met as well. Jesus invites them and he says, listen, be about what God's about, and God will take care of the rest. And again, what God's about in this context is taking care of those people that God loves and cares and thinks about. Back to Madsen again. A goal gives you a purpose. Achieving your dream only to feel purposeless in the end doesn't seem worth it. It's almost like he read this story that Jesus made up, isn't it? Focus, he writes, on something worthwhile and valuable. And it doesn't have to be something extraordinary. It needs to just be something that's worthwhile and valuable. And it would seem appropriate at this time of the year when we begin to think about Thanksgiving and the whole idea of this holiday, of the idea of giving thanks, right? Of thanking people, being thankful for the things that we have, and not focusing on all the stuff that we don't have. but to be able to sit there and enjoy a meal, and hopefully with other people that we enjoy being around. Those worthwhile, valuable things in life. Focus on something worthwhile and valuable. And he goes on to describe them. It could mean spending more time with your family. It might not, all right? Helping kids in a local school, or consistently exercising 3 times a week. It's about what's worthwhile, what's valuable and worthwhile. What are those ordinary things that we kind of pass off as not that big a deal, but all those things can make a huge, huge difference in life. See, maybe we need to rethink success for us. So let me give you a couple ideas as we wrap it up a little early today. What if success is being thankful for the ordinary? For just the regular stuff? And what if we've lost sight of the regular stuff in our pursuit of success and of getting ahead and all the other stuff that our culture tells us? What if all that comes to us isn't just for us? What if the reason we have it is so that we'll do something good with it? Something to think about today.